is possible to become free from debt, financial worry, your boss, and your zip code. You can start living a life you love, but first, you need to find your freedom. Using financial independence and lifestyle design principles, you can create the life of your dreams now. There are many paths to freedom, and that is what this podcast is all about. My name is Becky from 20free.co, and I am the host of the Find Your Freedom podcast. Every other episode, I interview women who have gone on a personal quest for freedom. Today, I'm interviewing Michelle from Frugality and Freedom. She is an Australian blogger in her mid-30s who has traveled to 40 countries so far, some of which during 2 6-month mini retirements from work. Recently, she just finished her year of slow travel throughout the United States from mid-2018 to mid-2019. She visited 20 states, spent only $55 a day, and worked short temp jobs at festivals and events to subsidize her travel. Michelle semi-retired 2 years ago, taking on seasonal work for part of the year to fund her budget travels for the rest. Now, she is transitioning to part-time location-independent remote work to better mix her travel and work together. In this interview, I am so excited to talk to Michelle about mini retirements, semi-retirement, and lifestyle design. Welcome to Find Your Freedom, Michelle.
My name's Michelle. I'm in my mid-30s, 36 to be precise. I come from South Australia. I grew up there in a firmly middle-class family. I'm the oldest of 3 siblings. I had a stay-at-home mum as I was growing up, and my dad worked in accounting, mostly for non-profit organisations, which I've only just come to appreciate later in life was a strong values-based decision from him. We were always pretty frugal, always relying on cheap entertainment, packing lunches, eating out at restaurants only at birthdays and key celebrations. So we really were pretty frugal, but I never really wanted for anything. There was none of that. I certainly didn't notice any use of debt from my parents, and I didn't see them stressed about money, but certainly they were price conscious and so on, especially with mum being at home all the time. If we noticed that things weren't worth the cost, such as buying popcorn at movies, we never did that. There was always packing snacks, and usually mum had managed a way to get free movie tickets anyway. So that was the kind of environment that I grew up in. I think it was also because my mum was part of a large family with about 13 kids, and also my dad was one of 6, so they had those frugal elements come through of not wanting to waste anything or making do with a little less.
And let's go back to what I call your early financial life, that time leading up to and right after you started working, earning money, and figuring out what to do with it. Tell me about that.
So through high school, I got my first job actually at the age of 15. It was the very glamorous job of selling hot dogs at a local sports stadium. So most of my weekends in my late teen years were spent smelling like hot dog flavored water. So that was delightful. But it did give me that extra spending money that I had that was all my own, beyond the very modest amounts of pocket money that I had as a kid. Actually having some income come in from that first job was really important to me. I finished high school at the age of 18 and went into university at that time. It's quite clear growing up that I was going to have to pay my own way through university. So I got a part-time job doing data entry to start with. Again, not very glamorous, but it did help me pay the bills. I was studying a commerce degree, which was something that I kind of fell into, needed to make a choice when I was coming out of high school, but it turned out to be not quite what I was interested in. So after around 2 years of kind of limping along, not being very engaged, I decided to drop out of that university course. But then there was time that I needed to continue to make some more money. So I got other administration roles, other customer service and office-based jobs. I wasn't quite sure where I wanted to head with those, but in the meantime, I knew that I did want to save up money and make sure that I could support myself. Fortunately, I didn't pursue the path of getting any credit cards or anything like that. It was very much instilled in me from growing up that if I wanted anything, I needed to save for it. So that really made sure that I had that work ethic early on, even if it wasn't my forever career that I was in at that point.
So it sounds like your parents did a lot with the way that they raised you and your family to instill some values of frugality and independence in terms of earning your own money and being able to support yourself and purchase the things that you want, be that a university education or anything else. So would you say that had a large influence on how you've evolved into financial, pursuing financial independence today?
Yeah, for sure. You're right. It was definitely had that culture of understanding that it was going to be up to me if I wanted to make anything of myself. I wasn't going to get the financial support. Definitely had some mindset instilled upon me about money that was positive, but in terms of the actual hard dollars, those were up to me to try and earn myself. So yeah, I definitely found that really important growing up as a background.
You're from Australia, right? So I'm from the United States, and all of my financial background and lingo, like 401ks and IRAs, are all US based. So what's different about Australian finance than United States finance?
I've definitely been reading quite a lot of US-based content in personal finance over the last few years when I've really been getting interested in this topic. And fortunately, a lot of the principles are the same. Of course, you want to save as much as you can, ideally earn more, invest the difference, and down the track, hopefully reach this thing called financial independence. So that those principles still very much apply here in Australia. In Australia, we do have some advantages, fortunately, from what I understand of the US, in that we have the universal healthcare, and so getting health insurance is really optional here. So that's not a huge financial concern for us, which does make a difference. We also have more generous student loan programs that are supplied by the government. So once you only need to pay back those student loans once you're earning, it comes through your taxes. So if you are in the position that you do need to take time away from work, you're not burdened with needing to make repayments on that debt at that time, which is very, very helpful for us, particularly when you're starting out early in a career. It seems to take the pressure off from what I've read compared to in the US. Our credit card industry as well is a little bit more regulated, so we don't have the vast amount of consumer debt there, again, that I read about in the US. It's a bit harder to get credit cards here, but that is also a good thing then on that debt side of things. And then also we have a typical vacation period of 4 weeks in each of our jobs. So we do have that little bit of extra time versus the 2 weeks that I read as standard in the US. So we do like to take advantage of our vacation time and chill out.
I didn't know that about your vacation. I would say that a lot of people in the United States would be very jealous of the 4 week. Yeah. It'll take, 5 or 10 years in your career to accrue 4 weeks of vacation. So
yeah,
that's great.
On the flip side, though, I mean, Australia, there are some disadvantages, of course. Our property prices are really quite expensive, so quite significant. The cost of living as well can be quite high. But again, there's, highs and lows in the differences between Australia and the US.
So you're pursuing financial independence as a single person. How do you find that impacts your lifestyle and your freedom?
Well, in some ways, I think it is easier because it means that I'm the only one ultimately in control of my money. I know exactly where it's going, what it's being spent on. So I think that's quite empowering. Having a good understanding of personal finance and building up some savings is actually risk management for me. So it doesn't matter what happens in my life, whether I stay single, whether I have a good long-term relationship, there's freedom and power in the fact that I know that I can look after myself financially, even if there isn't someone else involved in the picture. It does mean as a single person that, obviously I can't split some costs, such as when I'm traveling, I need to be paying for rooms and accommodation on my own. Typically, this does mean, though, that I stay in a lot of hostel dorm rooms, so I'm in a shared environment. And then when I'm having a home base, I usually stay in shared apartments, so there'll be other people there. So it's not as big a concern as you would think. But yeah, just at the end of the day, being reliant on myself for all of what I'm earning and what I'm saving is both empowering and can be a little bit crushing with the responsibility at times to not have someone else to lean on, but I prefer it for now.
And I think you're using all of those resourceful skills that are going to really kind of highlight the independence part of financial independence, where the self-reliance is something I think a lot of people that I've seen in the financial independence space may not have necessarily focused too much on if they were pursuing joint financial independence, for example. So I think getting those skills through your experience is going to serve you throughout your journey and your life.
And I think as well, like when I am dating or the relationships that I have been in, it definitely is very empowering to come to the table with my own savings. It means that I'm coming to the table as an equal then potentially, rather than expecting to go into something with the thought that I might rely on them financially. So it is certainly empowering to have that personal finance knowledge and savings behind you.
That's amazing. I think that's a really great, fresh perspective. And I love to hear that message, coming from a woman and going out to women. I think a lot of empowerment comes from having trust in ourselves financially and being able to support ourselves in an independent way. So I think that's a really important message. You realized you wanted to work in the arts, which is a field known for lower pay. And you've also recently been doing seasonal work and then traveling between contracts. So tell me about your career and work life now.
Certainly. Well, I think I already mentioned that up till my early 20s, I was kind of in some relatively mediocre admin jobs, which while they were helping me to pay the bills, they definitely weren't what made my soul sing or anything like that. But all throughout that period of my early 20s, I had actually been volunteering when there were arts festivals in the city in which I lived. I lived in what's called a festival state of Australia. So throughout summer, there's plenty of arts festivals for music, comedy, theatre, circus, all these kinds of things. It really brought me to life when I actually attended those events. So certainly my frugal nature that played a part in me wanting to volunteer at these events, because of course I got free tickets, which was a wonderful perk. But then it also opened up my eyes to the fact that there were other people that were working on these kind of events as a career. And so eventually I was fortunate to get a temp job in an arts festival when I was 24, having just left another relatively mediocre customer service job that I was no longer interested in. But I was fortunate in that some of the office skills that I'd built up over those jobs had led me to getting an interview and then ultimately the position for 3 months at this arts festival. It was quite typical to do short contracts at arts festivals. So after doing that first gig and realising, okay, I really do want to stay in this career. This is such a fun bunch of people to work with, as much as the pay can be a little bit lower. So I again got really interested in making sure that I was saving to cover off those periods where I might not have work. But then I pursued a bunch of short-term contracts, usually 3 to 6 months, and patched together a career where I bounced around across cities in Australia chasing festivals, as well as in my hometown too. That was age 24. I'm 36 now and continuing to enjoy working in the arts and events. These days, as you mentioned, I do seasonal work where I often will work 6 months of the year and then take the other 6 months off. Just over time, I've managed to build up savings to be comfortable in doing that. There were periods of this career that I was working full-time year-round, but I found for me, I quite enjoy the stimulation of moving between different organisations, getting to know different teams, and often being able to skill up quite quickly by hopping between jobs. So where it's often frowned upon in other industries, it can be a benefit.
So you are able to work on short-term contracts in the type of work that you do in the arts field. And how does that allow you to incorporate more balance into your life? It sounds to me like you've been able to do a good amount of lifestyle design to be able to incorporate things that are important to you. So what do you use the time in between contracts to do? Are you traveling, or are you sometimes looking to get a job that starts right again after your contract ends? Can you let me know how that works?
So it's definitely an evolving process, this arts career of mine. So yes, there have been periods where I have done back-to-back contracts where I've also been hopping between different cities to do those. It has been a lot of fun, but can be totally exhausting when you're working long hours in the lead up to events. You deliver them and then all of a sudden you have to change jobs and get to know a new team and so on. So in the last few years, I've decided to take more of a break between those contracts. And what that has looked like for me is taking extended periods to travel. I really do enjoy a lot of international travel. since doing so around about age 23 in 2007. So I take a lot of time to travel. It also gives me opportunity to explore different personal projects and experiment with ways in which I would like to live if I didn't have to work at all. And so having the balance of that time off and now still the stimulation of work is working out quite well for me these days.
And you have the time then to experiment and find what works for you. And since you've been doing this since you were 23, I can imagine that things might have changed. You've learned different things about yourself and what your likes and dislikes are. Travel seems really important to you. What inspired you to make travel a priority? Was there a big trip that completely changed your life, or was it something that you've always wanted to do? Tell me a little bit about that.
I think it also stemmed from the fact that early on, once I dropped out of university, didn't quite know what I wanted to do, was doing those assorted admin jobs. I just needed something to kind of build up some excitement again in my life. And so when I was 23 in 2007, I signed up almost on a whim to a short trip to go to Nepal, fundraising for a charity in advance of that, and then checking out the projects that they operate. The charity being Fred Hollow's foundation, who do eye surgeries for impoverished people there in Nepal. So I was going quite out of my comfort zone in taking that trip, but I absolutely loved it. I can still remember so much of what I learned on that trip about myself, about that the world is so much bigger out there. There's so many things I never anticipated. I can still even smell some of the smells that I experienced there in the very busy Kathmandu. So that for me just made me totally bitten by the travel bug, and I really wanted to continue to make annual international trips a priority for me. In fact, in 2008, I also took a 6-month trip to work over in the UK. So it wasn't very long before I was really taking that travel bug and bringing it to life with taking that trip when I was 24. And then, I've just been traveling at least somewhere internationally each year since then. So it's been quite a long time now, but certainly with 40 countries behind, it's still such an exciting thing for me to do. So I love it.
It sounds like you haven't always worked in Australia. By traveling, you were able to also find work and incorporate the location-independent lifestyle somewhat with your lifestyle of your seasonal contract work.
Yeah. So I took the opportunity to go to the UK to work, having actually got to meet a lot of contacts and in my arts festival life in my city of Adelaide who actually did the same thing. So it was already a path that had been trod before. So I was just following in their footsteps and doing a stint over there, also on some arts festivals. Probably wouldn't call it quite location independent entirely, because I was still going to a day office job when I was in the UK. But obviously it's a very different environment from what I was doing previously in Australia. I'm certainly looking at location-independent work down the track as an option, but I'm sure we'll get to talking about that a little bit later on.
Absolutely, we will. So you took 2 mini retirements, one in 2013 when you quit your full-time job to take 6 months to travel around Western Europe and the USA, and another 6-month mini retirement in 2017 where you traveled across Southeast Asia, the USA, and Europe. Can you tell me, what is a mini retirement, and what prompted you to quit your jobs or end your contracts and then take that time to really prioritize travel?
So for me, mini retirement really means something like a sabbatical or an extended career break, where it's not just necessarily a vacation only, but can be quite a deliberate time away from work, which can give time to reflect on what you want out of your career or out of life, in fact. And just taking that good time to reassess. I had a great time taking that 6 months off in 2013 when I was 29. I actually quit a full-time job that I had been doing for multiple years before that, but it was just at the point where I did want a change. And having learned a little bit more about personal finance and, in fact, financial independence as well, I had felt comfortable enough that I'd saved enough money that I could do that, taking that 6 months off. And if I did need to support myself for a little while before I got another job again once I came back, I would still be comfortable enough to do that. I just wanted to take that leap while I was still in my 20s, only just, and take that opportunity to explore some other countries a little bit further, to do some personal development while I was there, and really get to experience what people were talking about in the blogs and podcasts that I was reading about what a mini-retirement could actually look like. So I took another mini retirement in 2017. At that time, I was working contract jobs. So I had just finished a contract. So it was fortunate in that I didn't have to resign or anything like that. There wasn't that added complication. But again, I felt due for another longer adventure. So it took another 6 months out to explore more countries across Europe and a little bit of Southeast Asia. I do typically do a lot of my travel solo. So again, that really for me is an opportunity for personal growth and building up my resilience in that way. But also meeting people along the way more than I might if I was traveling with someone else, where you've got your inbuilt friendships already. It does actually get you out of your comfort zone a little bit more and give you the opportunity to meet others. So yeah, I've really valued those experiences. And I did want to be, particularly in the one that I did just a couple of years ago in 2017, a little bit more deliberate about thinking about, okay, if I do want to retire down the track, or if I do, in fact, want to just design my life a little bit better to reflect what I want out of it, like what would that really look like and so on. I definitely came to terms with the fact that I still like having some element of work or personal projects in my life. So I was at that time actually finishing a master's degree of all things on the road, doing that external study along the way. So it was good to have that project to kind of progress while I was traveling. It was just a wonderful opportunity to, again, take the opportunity to reflect as I forged ahead into my 30s to see what my career would look like at that point.
That idea of being deliberate and really testing out and using the first break as an experiment to see what balance you were looking for and whether work and how work fit into the lifestyle that you wanted to design. I think that's a really important message, and it seems like you've really been able to refine that as you've gone along. When you quit your full-time job for your first mini retirement, was that your last full-time position, and after that mini retirement you entered into the contract workspace?
Yes, that was actually my first and last ongoing full-time position. So I did that for about 3 years. Which was, again, wonderful opportunity for growth. I was a manager in that particular role, so I learned plenty. A pretty young manager as well, I should say, for a small team, many of whom were older than me in that arts festival. But yeah, that was the last time I've worked an ongoing role. So the last time I've had to quit anything too. Usually now it's been contract work that I see through, often between 3 to 9 months, we'll say.
You started with mini retirements. You took 2 of those and tested out what worked for you. Now you've adopted a lifestyle of ongoing semi-retirement, which you've been living since 2017. Most recently, you took a 1-year trip of slow travel around the USA in mid-2018 to mid-2019. First, how is this lifestyle of semi-retirement different than those mini retirements that you had taken in the past?
Yeah, so I guess with my perspective on what mini retirements are, they are more temporary breaks that you're taking from a career that you're going to forge ahead in a full-time capacity in the future, but it's just a mini break at that point. For me, semi-retirement goes a little bit further in that you're on an ongoing basis, living in a way that you're not working full-time. It can take a number of different forms. In some people I know will call themselves semi-retired, being part-time workers. The way in which I do it is I'm a seasonal worker for now. So in the last little while, I've done 6 months of a contract and then taken the other 6 months off. Or when I was traveling around the US last year, I was doing my work in short 2-week bursts at different festivals and events. So that was very much a, part-time seasonal work way in which I was structuring my year. But yeah, now having a decent amount of savings behind me that will continue to grow as I as time goes on. I'm keen to now have a lower amount of work in my life so I can explore my own personal projects and continue to travel, which I do get so much joy from.
So what was the initial catalyst for your change from the mini retirement model of, as you've written, bouncing between overwork and no work to then finding a healthy balance with intentional semi-retirement? Was that just a process that you developed after you tried out your mini retirements?
Yeah, I think I'm very keen on ongoing experimentation with this thing called lifestyle design. So after my more recent mini retirement that I took, going back to work on a 9 to 5, 40-hour-a-week capacity really jarred with my system. It was quite hard going from not working at all and just having nonstop fun on travels to being back in an office environment. As fun as the industry is, it was really quite hard to adjust back to that. So if I was continuing to only pursue mini retirements, that would probably have been only something I would have done maybe every 4 or 5 years or so. And at the time of coming back in 2017 from my mini retirement, that's certainly not an idea that I wanted to entertain. I wanted more of that flexibility that I'd gotten such a good taste of. So yeah, these days, with that semi-retirement idea, it means that, yeah, it's for me now that I'll see out the rest of my working career on a part-time basis or in those short bursts of work, just to have a little bit more balance, as you said. Prior to that, doing loads and loads of work and then putting on a hard stop to travel only, just didn't have the balance that I would have liked. And so now ongoing semi-retirement means that I can have a little bit more of that.
Yeah, it seems like your idea of lifestyle design is really centered around balance, and you've experimented with whether that means on and off completely or a mix of your life and your travels with your work. I think that's kind of the mini retirement model is reminiscent of a more extended version of what we do often in the United States, where we work for 50 weeks and we're probably overworked for 50 weeks, and then we take 2 weeks completely off. We go to vacation on some beach somewhere. We probably just have to lay there for a week to decompress. The jarring experience of going back to work after that, rather than perhaps, I think a lot of people might prefer what you've designed for yourself, which would be a part-time work schedule where life and work are integrated with each other instead of defined and delineated and completely separate. So it sounds like you really have dialed in what works for you for lifestyle design, and this concept of semi-retirement I think can help very many people who are thinking that the way that they work right now is unsustainable for them. Either their life, they're not able to pursue those passions that they have, if it's travel or if it's side projects, which you're saying that you're able to have more time to pursue those projects of your own. So I think your model is really going to be novel for a lot of people, and I think it could be really useful for people to consider modeling their lives after.
Yeah, there definitely seems to be an increase in interest in this thing called slow-fi as well. And I know we haven't quite yet defined financial independence, but slow-fi is slow financial independence. Again, taking those deliberate decisions to potentially work part-time or take more time out for personal projects, even if that extends your working career, enjoying it more along the way, is this idea that seems to be becoming more popular through the blogs that I've been reading lately.
Yes, I agree. I just heard about slow-fi, and my perspective on financial independence had certainly been more related to working extremely hard and extremely long hours to earn as much money as possible, save it all up, and be able to quit my job completely, rather than attaining balance during the journey and throughout the process of achieving financial independence. So we will get into financial independence in just a moment. I actually wanted to talk about your year of slow travel in the United States that you just finished recently this year.
Yeah, so I was fortunate in that I was able to get a working visa for the US based off finishing my master's degree in that mini retirement I'd taken in 2017. So it was a very flexible working visa for college students. Most people who use it are in their early 20s. So again, I'm messing with the system, using it in my mid-30s. But hey, people who are interested in personal finance often will find those kinds of loopholes and ways to optimize things to their advantage. So I was lucky in that I could explore the US for a full year then with that. Also taking the opportunity to do little bits of work here and there while I travelled to a total of 20 states in the end, usually by road. It helped shape my itinerary to be hopping between these different events and arts festivals that I worked on, things such as Sundance Film Festival, South by Southwest, a number of other film festivals around the place. It was lovely to have a mix of meeting some really nice people that were working at these festivals in a career industry that I'm quite familiar with, but seeing it in a totally different national context, those different events, but then also having a lot of time off to travel. So I probably worked a total of maybe 4 or 5 months across 9 different events as I explored the country over a full year. So it was wonderful to, again, mix those fun temp jobs with the extended travel. I usually did it in a budget travel way. So, as I say, I was often traveling by road, which means for me by bus. As we drive on the left-hand side here in Australia, I wasn't keen to attempt the right-hand side over the US. So you often will find me on the Greyhound buses, mega bus going around the place. I did the occasional Amtrak trip, as well as a few flights here and there. I do have a wonderful app that I was using called Polar Steps, which I'm sure you can link to, which mapped out my journey as I went along, and also managed to track my expenses with an app called Trail Wallet, which meant that I could keep track of how I was going with my spending, but also formed a very useful little journal too about when I made notes about where I'd eaten at certain cafes or what show tickets I'd purchased, things like that. So I was able to travel, as you mentioned, on about US $55 a day, so totaling about $20,000 for the full year. Which I didn't find to be a stretch at all. I'm very comfortable staying in budget accommodations such as hostels. I did a little bit of couch surfing as well while I was there. And then late into the journey, about 2 months remaining, I started to get into house sitting, which now that I've started doing that, I really recommend it and wish I'd gotten into it sooner. So I was a member of a couple of different websites, the main one being Trusted House Sitters. And I would basically go and look after people's houses. Primarily, they wanted people looking after their pets in their homes, but I would get free accommodation for doing so. So I ended up in about 7 different houses looking after lovely cats or dogs while having no expenses in terms of where I was staying in terms of accommodation. So that included a couple of stays in New York City where I was able to channel all of that money that I would have otherwise spent on Airbnbs or hostels to food, basically, which is what I really enjoyed, food and Broadway shows. So, yeah, I think for me, with travel and also just generally in life, it's made a real difference for me to get really clear on the things that I want to prioritize my spending on. And for me, accommodation is not one of them, or how I get from point A to point B. It's more about the experiences and the food and so on. So if I can spend less on where I sleep at night, it means that I've got extra money for, Michelin-starred restaurants or going to see the new Beetlejuice musical in New York on Broadway. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. I also got to meet a lot of people that are interested in personal finance. I connected with a lot of local groups from a podcast called Choose FI. Again, Choose Financial Independence. And I was also comfortable enough to organise a bunch of meetups as well as I was passing through cities. So having just started my blog, Frugality and Freedom, during the trip, I was able to connect with other bloggers and other people interested in financial independence. So that also made for a good social environment along the trip as well as I was travelling solo.
So it sounds like you have a really good idea of what your values are as it relates to what you're willing to spend on, and that helped
Mm-hmm.
you stick to a really tight budget in your travels. You were able to travel the United States. You went to 20 different states, and you spent only $55 a day. And you mentioned how some things don't matter as much to you, and other experiences and food and social interactions are important to you. And I think that's a really great skill to have, is understanding your values and being able to spend in accordance with them. It seems like that really helped you on your journey.
And I do want to point out that I never felt deprived along the way by any means. If I did want to change up how I wanted to spend, I did have the option to do that. So it was not like I was really trying to cut back and fit within that particular budget. It's just how that ended up landing with the way that I like to spend my money. So again, it didn't feel that tight to me on the trip. I was several occasions spending like multiple hundreds of dollars on some key experiences that I wanted to have. But yeah, just balancing that out with reducing spending on, I certainly didn't take any taxis, very few Ubers, things like that. I would often be on the public bus and so on. So yeah, just picking your battles, I guess, in terms of what you want to spend on really makes a difference in getting the most enjoyment out of the experience.
That's something that's good to incorporate when you're living financially independent life and when you're pursuing a financially independent life. So let's talk about financial independence, which is frequently called FI. What is your definition of FI?
Yeah, so I know that the kind of strict definition is about having enough income, which usually comes from investments, to cover your ongoing expected annual expenses so that you don't have to work a day job. Now, that's obviously quite a lofty goal, and that we do know plenty of people in the community that have achieved it, but it is not something that you achieve overnight. For sure, there are different steps along the way that can give you some freedom along that financial independence journey, and those are the things that I'm really interested in these days. I guess I learned about financial independence, or FI, around about age 28, after I'd been getting interested in personal finance basics a couple of years earlier. I really just fell down the rabbit hole and discovered some of the key bloggers that were writing about it at the time, such as Early Retirement Extreme, Mr. Money Mustache, soon after that, Afford Anything, and Mrs. Frugalwoods as well. And so just hearing about these people that were really saving a lot and then getting quite deliberate about how they wanted to live a lifestyle of freedom through having enough income coming in through their investments to cover off so that they didn't need to work a mainstream job. That was really appealing to me. I know that as much as I enjoy the industry that I work in, I do like the idea of having flexibility so that I don't have to work until I'm 65 or so on. So that idea was quite appealing. And as I mentioned, now having discovered financial independence and what it means with the spectrum that exists, and each step that you take along that journey, even if you aren't at that ultimate number, does add extra freedom along the way to have some flexibility, like that semi-retired life that I'm choosing to live now.
Yeah, so the FI movement is linked closely with the Financial Independence Retire Early movement, or FIRE, which you kind of touched on. You spoke about early retirement extreme, and some people are intentionally pursuing FIRE. They want the financial independence in order to be able to leave their jobs and not have to work again. So not all people who are financially independent want to retire. What does life after FI look like for you?
Yeah, I think just going back, FIRE actually tends to be quite misunderstood and gets a lot of negative feedback. So I believe a lot more people are starting to talk about the FI element of it and less so about the RE. That retire early element really confuses some people. They might actually enjoy their jobs, and so they think to themselves, well, I don't want to retire. Why would I want to try and pursue this goal anyway? That sounds like a terrible idea. I would be so bored. But actually the retire early was really intended to be that you have the option to retire from a mainstream job, perhaps a full-time 9-to-5 that you didn't enjoy, or just working for an employer. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you're retired from doing anything productive in future. You might have your own volunteering projects that you want to do, your own passion projects, things like that. So yeah, that retire early is definitely throws people a little bit. So definitely the FI element is the key thing to concentrate on, because that's something that I think everyone can get on board with. So for me, I'm really, these days, I'm roughly about 50% to my FI number that I would like to have in the future. So that would cover off my ongoing annual expenses at the rate at which I expect to spend them in future. That being said, now that I've gone to this semi-retirement mode, it will take me a lot longer now to get to my ultimate FI number. But fortunately, I've got some investments, mostly in index funds, that will continue to grow over time. While in the meantime, I just try and cover my expenses through that little bit of enjoyable work that I want to continue to do. Yeah, so now I'm just wanting to concentrate on lifestyle design and how I can incorporate the things that I would really want to do in a post-FI lifestyle, but actually have them now. I'm not that patient that I want to wait for a lot of things, knowing that that could come many, many years down the track, or in fact, not at all. You never know if you're going to get hit by a bus, as they say. So I want to live my best life now, to use the cliche. So using the financial independence ideas to live as best a possible life now as I can, and design my day-to-day to be as enjoyable as I would like.
That's great. And you're living for right now, because tomorrow is never promised. I talk about the potential of getting hit by a bus. I think I talk about it a little bit too much, because some people that I work with are like, what buses are coming very near to you all of the time, where you keep talking about this? But that's my typical example for the argument that I think you've laid out really nicely here for integrating the things that you want to do in your life with your work, instead of waiting until you're 65 and retired to then finally enjoy either traveling or exploring different interests that you have. Because we live, we want to live our whole life. We don't want to wait, or perhaps never get there to be able to do the things that we want to do. So I think what you're designing here in your lifestyle is incorporating what some people wait until early retirement or full retirement to do into your current life at this moment.
Yeah, it's the idea of having to carry these two different concepts in your mind, of both the YOLO, you only live once, so do it today, but also with the expectation that you are going to have a very long life. And so doing the things today in a way that are not going to ruin your finances, that mean that you're going to be comfortable and well off in the future, but still don't delay that gratification entirely. So you're only going to enjoy yourself in the future and not now. Otherwise, it's going to be a very sad journey until you get there.
So you have to balance your future and your present. I think a lot of people are convinced that they have to sacrifice one for the other. And the truth is that if you are careful about designing your lifestyle and you're intentional and deliberate in a lot of the ways that you are, Michelle, you can balance those two, the future and the present, and end up living a really satisfying life and enjoying all parts of the journey, instead of perhaps putting your head down and not enjoying the beginning part in anticipation of the reward of the end. So let's talk location independence. You've already done quite a bit of seasonal work to fund your travel and working at events while traveling. So now you're transitioning to location independence through remote work, such as virtual assistant offerings, event planning, and travel coordination. Tell me more about this progression and what that looks like for you.
Yeah, so now that I've got a fairly well-established career of doing these events and project management and so on, just knowing how much I do enjoy the travel elements, and how much I enjoyed in particular as I was traveling around the US, being able to move around and get to see different places, I'm trying to build up my location independent work, which means being able to work from any location, usually on a laptop, for example, usually on a freelance capacity, there's this term that goes around called digital nomad. So the person who is able to work for clients, continue to deliver on what they need to for them, but then can also incorporates that with travel to new locations. And I am very much excited by that idea. And so that's where I'm seeing my career head at the moment. I'm in fact attending soon the 7 in 7 Digital Nomad Conference while I'm living here in New Zealand, which we hadn't touched on yet. But yes, I'm just temporarily working in New Zealand. So very excited to learn a bit more about what it means to be a digital nomad, to be a location-independent worker. I feel like for a lot of them, they've really embraced that freedom side that financial independence talks about. They may not have the option to retire as such if they haven't got their the financial side set up, but the freedom side is very much something that those kinds of communities have in spades. So that is something that I would like to learn more about, and again, just trying to transition my skill set into a more remote capacity these days. So that will help me continue my mission to visit every country in Europe. I'm well on my way. I've got 27 ticked off now. So that will be the project for the next couple of years, is to continue exploring that part of the world. But I, without doubt, will end up back in the US soon enough too, to catch up with friends and so on. And just having that flexibility of not having to be at a set location in an office doing a job, as fun as that work might be, it just opens up so much more flexibility that I'm looking to pursue in future.
The location independent lifestyle, I think, appeals to a lot of people, and the so-called laptop lifestyle I'm certainly really interested in and on board with. And I can see anyone who's attracted to travel or bit by the travel bug like you've been and like I've been could really find a good balance in their life of travel and work by getting some type of employment that would allow them or enable them to earn money while they travel. So I think location independence is a really interesting next step to take and experiment for you. And I'm excited to see where your next evolution goes, because you've gone through several different changes in how you're approaching your balance of work and life. And it sounds like your lifestyle design is just continuing to be refined to match exactly what is working for you at the time. And what you want now might not be exactly what you want in the future, but you've built those skills and the flexibility to be able to adjust and adapt to something new and whatever you want to do. So that's really admirable, and your lifestyle sounds amazing. I would love to also travel to all of the countries in the world. I'm a bit behind you on my country count, but I think that's a really admirable goal for you to have.
You've got some time behind you, don't worry. But yeah, it's definitely been an evolving process. It's just continual experimentation to see what really works for me in terms of how I want the rest of my career to play out. It's been really important. So at the moment, I'm based in New Zealand for a little while. So again, exploring a new country, but I am also working a contract job of 9 to 5 work again, having just come back from that year around the US with a very different work environment. I am finding it a little bit stifling to be back in the 9 to 5. It's definitely confirming for me that I do want to go down that location independent path. So it's good to have that self-awareness for sure. Not a perfect process by any means. It's all about iterating and making changes as you go.
I think that's a great message, because none of us have it figured out when we first start, but we still have to start. And sometimes taking the step into changing the way that you're currently living your lifestyle in order to intentionally design your lifestyle can be really scary and feel really risky. But once you realize that it's an iteration and you can continue to change and experiment, and you're not making a permanent choice or permanent change, I think that's really freeing in terms of mindset, when you don't feel like you're taking your your present, which might feel permanent for a lot of people if they're stuck in a 9 to 5, and changing it for what may feel like a permanent and risky future of something that you might be unsure about but would really like to pursue. So the idea that everything's an experiment and you're able to continue to improve on the changes that you've made to match your changing desires even is a really positive way to think and a really strong mindset to have when it comes to lifestyle design.
Thank you. Yeah, I think so.
Now I'd like to do some rapid fire style questions. So I'm going to just ask you a question, and if you can give me a short response, and that will basically wrap up our interview. Okay?
Okay.
All right. So what does freedom mean to you?
I think for me, it means having options and having flexibility.
And what would you do if you could retire right now?
Quite similar to what I'm doing or what I'm hoping to do. Probably travel part of the year to lots of new different places, and then still maintain a home base where I could explore some personal projects of mine.
It sounds like you have a lot figured out then if you're already doing, what you would do in retirement. That's great to hear.
Working on it. A few more little changes, but trying to get there.
And what would you do if you could never retire?
I guess I would still try and make sure that the work that I was doing had some flexibility built into it. So whether that was being able to do part-time or location independent, something where I could do it on my own terms. I might even look to change industry to do something more in a not-for-profit, like charity space, things like that.
And if you could go back in time, what one piece of financial or lifestyle advice would you give yourself in your early 20s?
I think with the way that I started out in my early 20s, I would say to myself, don't be so hard on yourself, not knowing what you want to do for a career and not finishing that university degree, because it will all work out in the end. I would also suggest starting early in terms of savings and investing, because time is on your side and it can do a lot of the hard legwork with compounding, growing to a greater amount without little effort.
And it clearly did work out for you. You seem to have really figured out a lot of what makes you happy, and you have a successful career and a flexible lifestyle. So I love that advice of not being too hard on yourself. I might have to take that advice myself.
Yes, too.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Where can everyone find you online to learn more about your story?
Great. So I write over at frugalityandfreedom.com. I'm also pretty busy on Instagram at Frugality and Freedom, and also on Twitter at Frugality Freedom. So I look forward to having you all over there and reading about my story and connecting with you on social media.
I want this to be more than just a podcast for listening to, so I'm making it a do-cast, where you're getting information from the podcast that you can take action on to create real outcomes in your life. I call these power moves. If you implement even one of these tactics into your life, you're taking a powerful step towards finding your freedom. What are some power moves we learned from today's conversation? Here are 6. Power move number 1, empower yourself with education. Build up resilience and resourcefulness by learning how to manage your own money. As Michelle says, having a good understanding of personal finance is risk management. Being reliant on what you as an individual are earning and saving is empowering. And it is empowering to come to the table in a relationship as a financial equal with your own savings, your own income, and your own financial know-how. Are you in a relationship right now? Make sure that both you and your partner know what is going on financially. Sure, one person can take the lead in managing the finances, but each of you having a solid financial understanding will empower you to make better financial decisions together. Power move number 2, let your lifestyle design evolve. Michelle explains that lifestyle design is an evolution. Things will change. You learn different things about yourself and what your likes and dislikes are. Your perspective on financial independence and your approach to it is also allowed to change. At first, I wanted to work really hard and really long hours to make as much money as possible and be able to quit my job completely as fast as possible. Now, I've evolved to have a less work-centric and more lifestyle-centric approach where I aim to find balance. So give yourself permission to change your mind, your lifestyle, and your approach to FI. Power move number 3. Figure out where work fits in. Lifestyle design and financial independence do not have to mean a complete absence of work. Michelle realized that she enjoyed having some elements of work and personal projects in her life. She was actually finishing a master's degree on the road while traveling throughout the United States. You might need to do a little experimenting to figure out how much and what kind of work, works for you. That brings me to the next power move. Power move number 4, take a test run. Michelle defines a mini retirement as a sabbatical or extended career break, where it's not just a vacation, but it can be deliberate time away from work, which can give you the time to reassess and determine what you want out of your career or your life. Be deliberate and use your breaks as an experiment to figure out whether and how work fits into the lifestyle design you want, where you want to live, and what you want to spend your time doing. Power move number 5. Strike a balance. Michelle transitioned from full-time work to mini retirements to eventually intentional semi-retirement. Experiment with whether lifestyle design means on and off completely or a mix of life and travel with your work. Life and work can be integrated with each other, and semi-retirement as a lifestyle design can help many people who think that the way that they work right now is unsustainable for them. You should try to live the best life possible now because you don't want to wait until retirement or you can get hit by a bus tomorrow. Integrate the things that you want to do in your life with your work instead of waiting until you reach FI or retirement to enjoy your life. The trick is to find a way to balance YOLO with the expectation that you are going to have a very long life. Don't sacrifice the present for the future or the future for the present. Power move number 6. Spend in alignment with your values. Get really clear on the things that you want to spend money on and don't want to spend money on. Accommodation and transportation don't matter to Michelle, but experiences and food do. If she spends less money on accommodations by staying in hostels or on transportation by taking the bus instead of a taxi or Uber, that means that she can spend her money on Michelin star restaurants and Broadway shows. By spending in alignment with your values, you won't feel deprived. You'll simply be reducing your spending on things that you don't care about so you can splurge on what you care about. Figure out ways to cut your spending on those things that don't matter and give yourself permission to spend on the things that do. That is the 6th and final power move from this conversation with Michelle from Frugality and Freedom. To check out the show notes for this episode, which includes links to resources mentioned in today's interview and where you can learn more about Michelle, including a detailed timeline of her lifestyle design journey, go to 20free.co/episode 6. That's the word 20, free.co/episode 6. On next week's episode, I will be covering everything you need to know about lifestyle design, including what it is and an actionable exercise to help you chart your path to your ideal lifestyle. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you are listening to be notified as soon as that episode comes out. Do you need help figuring out what's next in your path to finding your freedom? Let's work together. As a money coach and lifestyle design expert, I am offering an exclusive small group coaching program this spring. As your coach, I will help you gain clarity about what freedom looks like for you, develop a strategy to get there, and overcome your money roadblocks on the path to financial and lifestyle freedom. People work with me because they want to start living their ideal life, but they don't have a clear path to get there. And they don't want to spend years or even decades using trial and error and disjointed advice from the internet to figure out how to make it happen. I offer both the proven tools that will clarify your vision and path, as well as intense accountability to make sure that you take the action needed to change your life. So if you want to take the concepts you are learning on this podcast and apply them to your life with my help, apply for the group coaching program now. Applications for limited available spots in the spring 2020 program are now open. Visit 20free.co/group coaching to apply today and schedule your free 10-minute call with me. I can't wait to help you transform your life and find your freedom. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you're subscribed to the Find Your Freedom podcast on whatever app you're using to listen to this episode. Do me a favor and also leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Go to 20free.co/iTunes to be redirected to the page on Apple Podcasts where you can leave your rating and review. I really appreciate it. If you think this episode would help someone you know, please share it with a friend. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Find Your Freedom podcast. My name is Becky. You can connect with me on Instagram and Twitter at 20freeco and sign up for free resources and email updates at www.20free.co. That's the word 20, FREE.co. I'll talk to you next week on another episode of the Find Your Freedom podcast.